Thank you all for coming here. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to present the results of my master's. I just graduated from the Master of American Studies last semester, and I also got the grant, the TCD practicum. So I went back to these communities and I organized a workshop as a way to bring back my results of this research and also to promote a collective discussion about what's going on with these protected areas run by campesino communities in the northern of Peru. The way this project started is that when I was waiting in 2017 for the response from UF, I had no job, and I was like, I was free, and I asked one of my friends, Peruvian primatologist, that has a local NGO in the northern of Peruvian Andes, if she had something that I could support in her NGO. And she said, yeah, we got a community where there is this conflict with Andean bears. People are killing Andean bears because they attack their cattle. So we want to understand what's going on there. So I spent 3 months in this community doing a survey about the conflict, but also a socioeconomic survey to understand the social scope, because this NGO is run by biologists, and it's very difficult for biologists, for people from natural sciences, to understand the social aspects and to work with communities, especially when there are people that have strong initiatives on conservation, but then how do you promote, how do you fill in the gaps, the interdisciplinary gaps that exist there. So when I was there these 3 months, I got to understand that it's super important to bridge the gap between the social and the natural sciences. And when I came to UF, I was very interested in coming to understand more about how these communities manage their resources and what are the intentions behind creating these conservation areas. So I came with a focus on understanding the drivers of deforestation first in these communities, in this region, and also to understand why, the reasons why they decided to protect their forests. So that's what I'm going to talk about, but also I'm going to talk about what I think needs to be practical, what's going back to these communities and promoting this collective discussion about what do they need, what do they need to learn, and how they can foster these initiatives that are already existent in these communities to protect these areas. So my study area is in the north of the Peruvian Andes. As you can see, the tropical Andes is a hotspot of biodiversity, and it's one of the most, it's actually the most important region in the world in terms of endemic species. If you are walking in this mountain, it's very hard to get from one place to another, and there are pretty much different species from in every mountain, and Ian can tell you about it. So it's pretty important, and most of this ecosystem is shared by all of these countries, but especially in Peru and Bolivia. And Latin America has a very interesting long history of communities, of collective ownership of land. Mexico, for example, 70% of the forest is owned by communities. And in Peru, the situation is not different. There are around 9,000 communities in Peru. 3,000 of them are indigenous Amazonian communities, and 6,000, more than 6,000 are campesino communities. And in this map, you can see that 6,500, more or less, communities in orange polygons. So I focus on the cluster of communities that are in the north, in the state or region of Amazonas, which are there. And in this region, there are 53 communities, but I selected 30 of them because I use secondary data for my analysis. So it happened that in 30 of these communities, the boundaries of the communities was also the same of the boundaries of the district. So I could collect information from the national census. And these are all of these communities. They are very, they ranges a lot in terms of size. So each of these communities are made up of 100 to 600 families. There are small-scale farmers that cultivate the land for subsistence, mainly tubers, corn, beans, and also for the market, coffee, sugarcane, and cattle. But most of the cases, each family owns just 5 to 10 cattle heads, no more than that. So that's how the communities look like. They have a plaza in the middle, and the houses are scattered around. Some houses are far close to where the farms or their cattle are. And most of the families also, they have 2 houses. They have one house around the plaza, they have another house where the cattle is. So this is my study area. Here are the 30 communities, and you see a network of roads, paved on violet, and unpaved roads in pink that cross all the region, and the protected areas. And I'm going to talk about the protected areas that they created. 10 of these communities, 10 of these 30 communities have created these protected areas for the last 2 years. But let's focus first on those 30 communities. And here in the middle is Chachapoyas, which is the capital of the region. Just right kind of in the middle as well of the road network. And that's how the city of Chachapoyas looks like. It's growing because this is one of the states, Amazonas in Peru, that still has most of the population is rural, but it's changing dramatically for the last years. So you see new barrios forming in the city, as in the middle of the mountains. Okay, so for my thesis, what I did, I had 2 questions. The first one was to understand what are the drivers of deforestation in these communities. For what I used a multiple linear regression. And the second question was to understand what are the contributions of the creation of these protected areas to decrease deforestation and also to promote an effective governance of collective resources, forests and other resources. So going for the first question, I used a framework of Gates and Lambie in 2001 about tropical deforestation, and they explained that there are underlying approximate drivers, factors of deforestation. And in this case, since there are communities, peasant communities, the proximate and most important factor is agricultural expansion, from my understanding. It's like what was my hypothesis. And then underlying factors, road infrastructure, socioeconomic factors, but there are other, like political, perception, cultural, that I haven't addressed. Because I'm using secondary data. I didn't collect the data myself. I collected the data from the national census. So I focus on all of these factors. So my first hypothesis, I have 4 hypotheses to understand forest cover loss in these 30 communities. And my first hypothesis, for what I made a bunch of models, was that agricultural expansion alone drives forest cover loss. And for that, I have cattle production, cattle density, like how many heads of cattle per hectare in each community, because I have communities that are bigger than others. Sheep production, family farm size. For the second hypothesis is that road infrastructure alone drives forest cover loss. And here I made measurements. Let's say this is a community and it's scrolled by a bunch of roads. Some of the roads are paved. This is a paved road and then unpaved roads. So what I did is I also measure road density for each community, and like meters of the road per hectare in the community for paved and unpaved, and also the distance using the existing roads, the distance to the main cities. First, the capital of the region, and then the city of the coast of Chiclayo. and then the city in the Amazon on the east, which is Moyobamba. And then the distance to the Andes to Amazon highway, which is an important highway that I didn't explain before, but looking at this map again, this is the Andes to Amazon highways, the most important highway in the region that crosses from east to west the region, and it connects the Amazon to the coast. And the most of the people in Peru lives in the coast. That's why it's important. It was built in the 60s by Fernando Belaúnde, this president in Peru, that has a very strong program of colonization of the Amazon. And he also, in his turn, he gave credits to people from the coast and from the Andes to move to the Amazon. So that road is pretty important. That's why I measured the distance to the road from each community main village. The third hypothesis is that socioeconomic factors alone drive forest cover loss. And here I have population density, how many people live there, population change, like for, from censuses, there is a question that asks to every person in the community, were you were here 5 years ago? And yeah, that's population change. Oh no, sorry, that's immigration rate. Population change is the difference from 2007 and 2017 census. Household size, woman fertility, and then I have also social factors as literacy rate and economic factors as off-farm opportunities. If what is the percentage of people that live in the community that rely on other activities that are not farming? And also indicator of wealth. In Peru, in most of the cities, you have people that own a gas tank like this one, and they buy one or they replace the gas every month. So that's kind of an indicator of wealth for these rural communities. Otherwise, if they don't have this, they burn, they have leña? Yeah, in their houses. And my fourth hypothesis is the contribution, the combination of all these factors drives forest cover loss. Because I expected that if I have more people in the community, there are more pressure, there are more agricultural expansion. And if they are the connection with the markets, let's say the coast or in the capital, that will bring also more people. So a combination of all of the factors that I already mentioned. And my response variable is forest cover loss. And I use this platform that is have free and very easy to use information of forest cover loss and gain every part of the world for the last 18 years. So I use that information as explanatory variables. I use information from the national censuses, the population and agricultural censuses from 2007, 2017. And to measure the road density and the distance, the information from the Ministry of Transportation and Communication of the country. So this is forest cover loss for the region. It's been increasing. As you can see, there's a tendency of increasing every year. And the maps of Global Forest Watch, you see in green the already existing forests. In this case, it's a forest that existed in 2010. And then in pink, the deforestation. And you can see how it evolves every year, which is cool. And that's the road, the Andes to Amazon road. These are all my variables. I started with 23 variables, and I confirmed all the assumptions necessary to run a linear regression, collinearity and homogeneity and all of that. And I ended up with all those 17 variables. And you can see there's a lot of variance between one community and another. For example, let's say immigration rate. There's a lot of immigration, that's people that is coming to the community, and it's 11% on average. There's one community that 40% of the people that live there haven't been there 5 years. And that's people that are migrating from the Andes, from the higher Andes. But there's also population decrease because There's people that are already been there, but they're moving to the cities. So there's kind of replacement, but overall decrease in the population. Yeah, cattle density, some communities that rely more on cattle than others, and etc. There are some communities that are just crossed by a paved road, and there are others that are very, very far from a paved road. So for the hypothesis one, those the first hypothesis, the second and the third, they helped me to find what are the most important variables of each of the components. And here for hypothesis one, I found that cattle density is the most important for every variable. How many cattle per hectare? And then also I have farm size and other variables. For the second hypothesis, I had that in most of the models, paved roads are the most important. Not unpaved roads, paved roads, and then distance to the cities, especially the city of Chiclayo. And then for the hypothesis 3, I found that the indicator of wealth, how many, the percentage of families owning a gas tank, it's an important factor explaining forest cover loss. And when I combine all these factors together, I found that cattle density is super important to explain forest cover loss, and then the combination with other factors. The distance to Chiclayo, to the city and the coast, that looks like is the main market for this cattle. And then paved roads are the most important too. And you can see here the strong correlation between cattle density and the forest loss. And this is for the last 10 years, forest loss from 2007 to 2017. So again, paved roads, cattle density, and the indicator of wealth are the most important to explain forest cover loss in the last 10 years in these communities. And something that surprised me is that it's not important how many people live there, the population density. And that goes along with what the theories on tropical deforestation are finding, that as rural communities are getting more inserted into the regional, national, or even global economy, global market, there are other reasons at these scales that are more important, that are driving forest cover loss more than the internal factors. And that's what is happening here. And most of the cattle is going to the coast. And then I check on information of the beef consumption on the rural and in the countryside and in the cities of Peru. It is increasing in the cities. It's like 3 times in Chiclayo than in any of these communities. And that's the tendency. But for now, this goes just for the local and especially the national market, not the international one, for now. So the effects on commodities explains the effects of commodity markets on land use change in the tropics, which is not a new story, but it might be new for these rural communities, because these people that own these lands in a collective fashion, they're supposed to, by the view of the government, they're supposed to cultivate the land for subsistence. But that is changing. And it's not bad, it's the way it is. But these take us into the reflection that it's important to better plan road development. There are a lot of projects now to have roads everywhere in these communities, because people is demanding for that, but like where these roads should go or not. That's the important question. And there are protected areas that are already there. So that takes me to the second question, which is related to the conservation areas that these communities have created. So the Peruvian government started this initiative to promote private owners to create protected areas in 2001, and since then till now there are 130 private conservation areas. And it's kind of weird, but you can also say private conservation areas by the protected areas that are created by communities. peasant communities, which should be another thing, but they have their ACPs, they have their áreas de conservación privada as well. And when I was working for this NGO and this community, I attended to some of the meetings. So there's a grassroots organization called Red AMA that consists of 15 private conservation areas, and they have meetings, but the ones that are absent all the time are the people that represent the communities. Because they don't have the money, or they don't have the interest, or just they don't have the time to go to these meetings to the cities. So that was a big issue. The grassroots organization was like, oh, how we can do to engage the people from the communities to come to the meetings and to be more involved. They already have the conservation areas, but it seems like they're not doing much with them. And when I was working with this NGO, I found out that there are a lot of fights. There are a lot of local NGOs that are kind of fighting with each other to work with one community, one place, and another. And they're just very proud to have these communities to create the protected areas, but from then to now, there haven't been much done about to understand, okay, what is the situation with this conservation area. So there is a lack of information of how they are and like what it needs to be done. So for this second phase, what I did was to try to understand if the creation of these conservation areas have promoted a reduction of deforestation, and it has promoted effective governance of the conservation areas. So these are all the conservation areas in the region. Oh my, 20 minutes? Perfect. So there are 9 conservation areas, and actually the biggest conservation area in Peru is here, 46,000 hectares. And there are some communities like more than half of the territory was allocated to the conservation area, like this one, but almost 70%. And I got a bunch of questions I use again as a response variable forest cover loss for the last 10 years using Global Forest Watch information. And my question was, first, if the communities that have conservation areas are having less forest cover loss than the ones that do not have it. And I didn't found that. Kind of, it doesn't matter if they have conservation areas or not. And also my other question was if 3 years before, for the communities that have conservation areas, if 3 years before the creation, they have more forest loss than after. And it's no different, there's no difference either. My third question is, at the ACP, at the conservation areas that have changed with the creation of the protected area, and there's also no difference. So it looks like the fact that having a conservation area doesn't make much difference in terms of if that community and one of the forests more or less. And then for, again, the communities that have the conservation areas, I compare if inside there's deforestation than outside. And yeah, there's less inside, but for one community that is crossed, they have a paved road crossing the conservation area and the community as well, which is this one. So then I did this preliminary analysis using the framework of Elinor Ostrom on the principles of effective governance of common resources. And are these ones clearly defined boundaries, the congruence of the law to local needs and conditions, the participations of the community members, rulemaking rights, the monitoring of resources, gradual sanction to offenders, if there are procedures for conflict management, dispute resolution, and the recognition of the right to users to organize themselves, which is kind of self-explanatory for community. So yeah, what I did was I went and visited every of these communities, and I asked them what are the enabling and the limiting factors for an effective governance of your resources, and especially the private conservation, the conservation area itself. And they mentioned a bunch of things. I just made a list. Some of them applies for some communities, some of them apply for other communities. And it was preliminary evaluation that gave me fit for the workshop that was part of the practicum. So among the things that they said was that there are 2 communities that are receiving payment for ecosystem services for for water, and there's one conservation area that provides water to the city of Chachapoyas, that's the Tilacancha. And the other one, Copallin, is also actually the municipality is paying for a park guard. There's some environmental education going on in some communities more than others. There's been better control of land invasion and selling. In some cases, there's land trafficking within the community. So something that I haven't explained before, but these communities that I say have from 100 to 600 families living there. Each family it's given permission to use a portion of land, but it's not their land. It's the community land. So they have the permission to use it, and they cannot sell it, but that happens. Since there's this pressure of migration going on, so people that leave and say, okay, I sell you this for 1,000 soles, and the people coming in, and that's creating problems because there's new people coming in that in most of the cases are not interested in being part of the, to participate of the asambleas, of the community meetings, or to work for the communities. So yeah, that's one of the limiting factors, actually, a weaker participation of community members in the collective organization. And that for sure affects the management of the conservation areas. There's also, after the creation of these protected areas, because for each community, there's been one NGO helping them. And most of the cases are different NGOs. So the environmental education, the promotion of ecotourism has been promoted with the support of these NGOs. There's also been some monitoring of deforestation using cell phones with Global Forest Watch. The grassroots organization Red AMA got a grant 2 years ago for Global Forest Watch, and they gave themselves, and they went to the community and trained the people to get to how to read the alerts. So actually something that anybody can do. You can go to the platform and subscribe and get weekly alerts from the place you are interested about deforestation happening for the last week. So they got trained in how to use that, and but they needed to go and confirm if that deforestation was a landslide, was fire, or was actually something illegal or something important to check out going on there. And also there is one community that has been promoting scientific research. Like the one that I visited, that I mentioned, there's been some research on ambient birds and conflict as the one that I did. That's on ecotourism as well. As limiting factors, no clear political boundaries. In Peru, out of the 9,000 communities that exist in the country, like around 70% of them have the clear boundaries stated in the title, the property title. But for the rest of them, it's very complicated, and they have problems with other communities, with other districts, with other municipalities, because they're not clear boundaries. That's a problem. There is illegal selling and sometimes trafficking going on, as I mentioned. There are plans for road building in some of these communities that cross conservation areas. Not adequate response from the government. There is indifference from local authorities. Yeah, so community members that don't know, not even the existence of the conservation areas. And some people that they don't find the benefit of it. Even farther, it's like they find that the area is limiting the use of the resources, because now they cannot go and have their cow, the cattle, grazing there. So using all of what they mentioned, I put each thing into the boxes of the 8 principles, and I came out like what some of the communities that are working better, that are doing a better job in managing their resources. And that goes with how the forest cover loss goes. But again, this was a preliminary analysis because I just asked them, what do you think are positive, what do you think are negative? So when I was talking with my committee last semester, we came out that would be really interesting to go and listen to them. That they give me, not for me to ask them, but for them to just tell me what are the factors that are most important and what are the threats and what are the actions that they should be carried out in their communities. And that's what I did here 3 weeks ago in collaboration with the grassroots organization, the Red AMA. We organized this workshop when the representative of each of the 10 communities came. And first I shared everything that I just mentioned earlier. I shared with them the results of my research. And then most of the workshop was to facilitate the collective discussions on the threats of actions in their territories. So the first question was to what are the threats? And they pop. And then they split into groups of each community, and they had to pick what were the 5 most important threats. And they had to develop them and come up with actions for each of them. And then explain to others. They have some time to explain to the rest of the group. And I was very interested because I found the commonalities, but at the same time were how different are each community because of the history that they have. Some of the communities were created 50, 100 years ago. There's one community that was created in the 1600s in the colony, the Spanish colony was in the region. So they have a very interesting and history that they got able to share in the meeting. It was part of the participatory component. They also after checking on the maps of each community and made them discuss on the map of the whole region of Amazonas, where the protected areas are here. So they have to come up with what are the threats and to put them in the map and what are the actions. And I also made them do timelines, 4 groups for them to think what are the most important things that happen in terms of law, in terms of institutional changes, social, economic changes for the last 40 years, what is happening now, and what do they think is going to happen, and what do they expect to happen in the future. And then they share as well. And I cannot say all of it, but it was super interesting discussion. Most of the things that I said that before, they were more less education, less migration, more forests. There was no water, no sewage system, no electricity, just 30 years ago. No conservation initiatives. But for the last 30 years, the creation of protected areas and the conflict with these protected areas that were created by the national government without asking them anything, and then the creation of the protected areas within the communities, and then people moving, people leaving the land, and then more cattle, and things that happen in the future. And what they expect to happen is to have more responsible ecotourism, to protect the waterheads, to get more support from NGOs and the local government, more participation of the people within the community, but especially the youth, the young people, the grassroots organization to be stronger, and many, many other things. And they also think of specific actions for each of their conservation areas. And at the end, I asked them to evaluate the workshop, what worked well, what didn't work well, and like that, there are many things out there. And it was really interesting, something that I personally like a lot to get back, and I think that's an amazing opportunity that the city provides to the students, is to be able to get back to the communities and show your results. And that was super important, because of course I'm not gonna read our papers in English, right? And then to strengthen the partnership with grassroots organizations in the region. And at the end, what I come at, my main takeaway of all of this experience is that there is a need to strengthen the capacities of the communities in the way that they govern themselves. They have the responses, but they don't have the resources to discuss constantly what they need to do in the future. And that's the most important thing. And then to use secondary data that is free and ready to use, that is out there, but it needs to create a bridge for the local people to use it. Thank you.